I'm beginning recording, and I want you to sort of reflect on that. Anything that is being recorded can be edited. And so, and yet when we get involved in these kinds of courses, you tend to say things that are important to you and sometimes personal. And so you maintain complete control over the information. If you would like me to edit out anything within the next 6 months, a year, I mean, whatever, I'll go back and edit it. And so please, I wanted to give you formal recognition that there is a recording. And the reason is I have students in Boise that want to participate with us, but they're not available on Thursday nights. So that's why I'm recording it, and we'll be making it making it available to that student. Are there any concerns on recording? That, and I believe you'll see it in your corner, so that you sort of you'll get a little reminder that it is being recorded, but we begin to forget that in our conversations. And I've had many students that went, oh my goodness, can you take that out? Yes, I can take it out. So, and I'll be happy to do it for anything that you would like me to ad infinitum. So anytime into the future. So welcome. Oh, now I'm going to get some sharing going here, so I can begin to it's going to be. And that didn't seem to work well. So let me.
We see the slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you see each other? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
My concern is oh, there it goes. Okay, so now I just wanted to see you. That was what I was missing. So I'm just clicking buttons here until it works. So I've managed to click buttons until it worked. So that is wonderful. Well, welcome. So technology okay, sound okay, video okay. Are we in good shape?
Yes.
Yep.
Great, thanks Paul, thanks Chris, and thanks Victoria. So I'd like you to do a little more self-introduction again. Chris and Paul gave me a little bit, and I'm excited to have you in the course. And so if you do that again for Victoria's purposes, so that she can hear what I've already heard. This time I'd like to sort of focus it, again, your name, and I'll begin with you, Chris, if you'd like to start, and then Paul, and then Victoria. The location, where you're from, any other details, if your background is helpful, if there's some places in your background that might help us understand you, add that to the location. Employment, it'd be interesting to know if you were in private practice or whether you were in a public space, or how your employment worked into your background. Your interest in healthcare and bioethics. And the final question is, how has healthcare ever failed you? And so what I'm searching for there is bioethics is designed to solve some of the failures of healthcare. What story are you comfortable in telling that indicates to us an experience that we might be able to draw on as we're together of the failure of healthcare from your perspective? You both got, Paul and Chris, vast experience. And if it's more helpful, you can divert that from how it failed you to how healthcare failed in a clinical setting that you were a part of. So it doesn't have to be terribly personal if you want to avoid that. And so, Chris, I'll start with you. Would you give us a little bit of your background?
Okay, we retired up here about 6 years ago. Um, and I started out working at West Valley Medical Center in Caldwell and worked there for 25 years. Went back to PA school and then became a PA at one of their rural clinics and worked there for 20 some years. So, and I've been in management at the hospital as well as head of the lab. But
That's the local hospital?
the Caldwell Hospital. Yeah. So I have all kinds of stories for healthcare failing. Personally, I have a kind of a rare autoimmune disease, and so that process, I was glad to have medical knowledge in the step-by-step process of trying to figure that out and go through different doctors. And anyway, it was a kind of a long story, but it worked out. And then as far as the ethics, everything went really well when I was professionally, except, about a year before I retired, somehow I had a complaint that went to the state PA Society and the Board of Medicine. It was on a patient that I didn't even see or write the prescription, but somehow that prescription was sent to a nursing home, and then a relative complained. And so I was basically considered guilty for about a year and got all these messages from the Board of Medicine that I thought, how can this even be? I mean, there's no proof. I continued to practice and everything, but I explained to them that it was sent out on the computer wrong. I wasn't even the prescribing person. That was my supervising physician that actually prescribed it. And, in the end, they, in quotes, let me go, but I had nothing to do with it. I didn't, but it made me feel so stressed that, there was really no recourse other than they did send me a letter saying that it would go off my record, which was nice. But for a year, they kept having these meetings about me. It was ridiculous.
Oh, boy. Thank you. That will be an interesting one to reflect on. Thank you for that story. Paul?
So I lived in the same community as Chris for years down in Caldwell. And after being a medical corpsman, went back and became a paramedic. So I worked on the ambulance, and then I went back to nursing school and worked in the hospital along with being a paramedic, and then did flight nursing and then went back to school at 50 years old and became a nurse practitioner. So saw patients in healthcare settings, usually rural clinic or urgent care. So that's my healthcare background. As far as healthcare experiences, even back in the military, we would learn about triaging. And when you had mass casualties, whether we were out on the ambulance or if I'd ever been a medic in field, you had to determine who was going to live, who might have a chance to live, someone that is you're pretty sure is going to die. You're not sure. And then you kind of triage them. And so you set them up into three categories. And, you know, that was always a tough thing to do. And, you know, had some experiences having to do that. And, you know, that when I think about bioethics, that's, you know, the triage idea is even what the hospitals are looking at having to do right now, as far as I understand. And then the other thing is, since I was the emergency field, I often had to determine a patient was dead, and the family is sitting there saying, "Why aren't you flying them to the big city?" And having to explain to them, well, you know, we have limited resources here. We've got other flights we need to go on. You know, your 90-year-old dad is, you know, has passed away. And there was times when we transported them just because that was the best thing, I guess, for the family, even though we knew they weren't going to make it. So anyway, that's some of my healthcare background. But, you know, 45 years of it, a lot of experiences.
Excellent. Thank you. Victoria, welcome.
Okay, well, hello again. And I moved to McCall about 2.5 years ago. Originally, I'm from Russia, and I actually have no healthcare background whatsoever. And I've had very little experience with healthcare in general. I work in translation right now from home and do a lot of Zoom translations, interpreting verbally or just on the keyboard. To me, I think the word ethics was the catchword, and I'm interested in everything that has to do with ethics and society in general, environmental ethics and other branches of it. I wanted to know more about bioethics since it's so prominent right now in our current situation, and it looks like it is not getting any better. The pandemic is putting a lot of stress on hospitals in some states already. So yeah, my healthcare failures, I don't have really maybe very relevant stories, but I've always had very many problems with teeth. And to tell you the truth, when moving to the US 20 years ago, I thought that these things could be taken care of much easier here than it was than in my hometown of 2,000 people and no dentist. But to tell you the truth, I still haven't taken care of my mouth because I don't have the kind of insurance that would actually allow me to do that. So that's another ethical and social issue, I guess, in this country that is putting a lot of stress on people, and I am on the receiving end of that too, in spite of the fact that we do have medical insurance and dental insurance, but it's just too much out of pocket that I just can't. Mm-hmm. I have to balance, you know, and think about my kids and think about other things that are very important in our lives and demand resources. And so, yeah, my place is a little bit more down the list, I guess, in my of that. So that's the way it is.
Thank you. Oh, that's, yeah, having just come out of the dentist's office this week. Yeah, that's, and it more broadly is the issue of insurance and how do you get care when insurance is so expensive, either on the front end, whether it's from the premiums or on the back end as a result of the deductibles and the limits. So that's a great conversation, and pleased to sort of dive into the failure of American society on that one. Well, excellent. I'm going to introduce myself in just a minute. So I'm going to take us into the very first case that really launched the bioethics conversation in America. And just to get us going with this case, it's 1961. Victoria, not even alive, right?
True.
So where were you, Paul and Chris, in 1961?
Well, I was in Caldwell going to school.
Were you? Yeah, Caldwell. Paul, were you?
Oh, I was 11 years old, and I lived in Salt Lake and attending elementary school.
Yeah, 61 was the start of LBJ's, or not LBJ, JFK's presidency. And so just to sort of locate it a bit in your memory banks, if you remember anything about JFK, we're dealing with his presidency in 1961 with the assassination in 63. And so I'm 6 years old in that, and I'm in a town called Red Deer, Alberta. And all I can remember about Red Deer, I can remember a lot of things actually. My dad was the ambulance driver and the funeral director of our community. And my mother was a registered nurse. And so medicine was our household. We always talked about it. And so all of Dad's jokes tend to be to be the EMT style of jokes. And as a funeral director, his favorite joke was he could never decide whether he should go fast or slow when he picked someone up. Because if he went fast, then he was serving one cause. And if he went slow, he was serving the other cause. So he was always in this ethical dilemma of how fast he should go when he was returning from a call. So you can imagine with that kind of humor, I've lived with the ethics of healthcare for a long time. So we're in the summer of 1961 in Seattle, Washington, and a committee has been formed. And there are 7 members on that committee. There's a surgeon, there's a minister, there's a banker, there's a labor leader, there's a housewife, there's a government worker, and a lawyer. To this day, there are no names attached to each one of them. When you're a member of what is called the God Committee in the literature, you recognize that your life would be sort of marked if for the rest of your existence, and I assume many of them were no longer with us, or at least they would be quite elderly, it would be an interesting memory for them. And so in the literature, we don't have their names, though, other than they were assigned to this committee. The problem that this committee was tasked with solving is they had the brand new kidney dialysis machine. It had been discovered, it had been created in Seattle, and kidney dialysis was a horrific problem in the 50s. And thousands would die of kidney disease. And there were literally thousands of candidates that wanted this new kidney dialysis machine. Their task was they had to pick 10 for the first program. 10. And the question that they had to set out was, how in the world do you pick 10 people out of thousands that needed it? There was very few set guidelines as they entered into their conversation. They wouldn't allow anyone older than 45, as the rationale was the complications would be likely, and there wouldn't be any children because the procedure would be too long and they didn't feel they could manage children. That's it. Those were the guidelines that this committee was tasked with. And so now I'm putting you on that committee. How would you select those 10 people? What would be the most important things for you as you consider this very scarce resource? Kidney dialysis machine, 10 people can get it, thousands want the opportunity. We've just introduced each other just like this. Wow. What do you say?
I would just, of course, there are probably medical considerations of other factors that might be filtered out first. The general medical condition of people, if they have other complicating issues or not. But ultimately, I would just go for the random selection.
Oh, okay. Chance is a crucial part of these kinds of decisions. Can you give any rationale to why chance would be important to you? What's your sense of what chance offers you?
I think in this case, you would give everyone equal opportunity, okay. And you would also keep the committee more objective to everyone, because there is a high chance that maybe some members of this committee have a relative or a friend who also needs this procedure, or some chance maybe that they do. Naturally, you would be pulled to help someone that you know first, or maybe some other psychological factors would influence people, because we are people, and random selection would just help you not get those issues involved in your decision.
So you're recognizing the bias of being a human being. Mm-hmm. And so that bias is what we use in our entire life. We are constantly living our biases. And so those those many biases that we have developed over our life are what keep us safe, what keeps us organized, what keeps us figuring out how to live life. And so what you're trying to do is to minimize the bias that is natural to a human being. So that's an excellent consideration. And so, Chris and Paul, what's coming to your mind in this conversation?
Well, I always like I have several connections with transplants in relatives and friends, and it's kind of the same decision. It would be hard to have the committee and then pick one of their friends or relatives. So that had to, would probably need to be on the list. Since there is such a small percentage of people that could be picked. The other is that, can they, are they located in a place that they can get to the dialysis machine? That would cut out quite a few people. Are they trying to take care of their bodies as much as possible, as far as habits, like are they drug abusers, are they smokers, alcoholics, that type of thing, for a checklist. But if you pick the people that are likely to sustain more than a certain period of time, and then pick the random, randomly pick those that would be successful for more than a short time.
Okay, so proximity was important. Literally, there's thousands, but how many are close to the hospital? And so that helps you narrow your pool. You're dealing with the entire world that may need kidney dialysis, and so your first thought was equally as far as excluding the natural folks that you might want to make sure your family was a part of this. You then went to proximity, and that was important to you. And then you went to creating that moral decision of habits. What habits do people have that are beneficial or are a negative influence in their life? And if they have negative habits, then that's going to create risks for the dialysis. And you were wanting to make sure that the best person would be available to receive the dialysis. And so that's a more than fair consideration of that.
I guess another thing would be, how their dialysis is going so far. If they weren't doing well on dialysis, then nobody had been on dialysis yet.
Exactly.
Or this was just a new machine.
Would the procedure create issues for them that you would be aware of? Would there be allergic issues? Would there be those kinds of issues that would make them a poor candidate for the procedure itself? And so that's important to recognize. So I think those are all thoughtful. And so, Paul, what's your first instinct?
Well, probably the surgeon's opinion on this committee, of the Gods Committee, he's probably looking at who has maybe end stage renal failure and who perhaps only has months to live, yet you could extend their life by starting them on the new dialysis machine. So you could look at it, as a surgeon, he's saying, geez, let's try to see who will benefit the most from it right at this point. So, they would take a look at their lab and say, these people have end-stage renal disease. They've got to get on dialysis in order for them to, survive. The other thing would be age. If you can help somebody that is, 30, they maybe have 50 more years of life, or somebody at 45 has less years of life. I mean, so is that a moral or ethical dilemma? And then also is, what family are they supporting? Is this woman who needs dialysis has, 5 kids, and she would leave those 5 kids alone if she was not able to, get on the dialysis and survive her kidney disease. So those are a couple, some things I'd look at.
Excellent. And so again, you're trying to find benefit, not only benefit of the individual, but benefit to the society. You're making a calculus here of benefit, and the surgeon would be with your staging. Who's going to get the greatest benefit from the treatment? An excellent point that needs to be made. Who's going to get the benefit on the number of years they're going to receive? Who's going to get greater benefit from family issues, whatever the family issues that you may feel are important? And so that calculus is very important in making those decisions, and a surgeon would be involved in making those calculations constantly. That would be a typical calculation that the surgeon would use. So how do you react to each other's points? What did you sense when you heard the other person's point? Victoria, why don't you start?
Yeah. I, for some reason, channeled this recent news that I'm following from Alaska because I moved here from Alaska. I still read their paper a lot. And they are struggling right now with whether their prisoners should be getting vaccinated, one of the, as some of the first populations to get the vaccine for COVID. And I made a parallel to that because their prison systems are getting overwhelmed with COVID cases. And some people in the decision-making committees there are feeling like, we need to solve that because they are under government care, and we need to help to help us take care of these people basically the best we can. And so with that, I guess, the question of habits and whether, of course, alcohol abuse and smoking, that makes a difference for kidney transplant, or, how well the procedure would go. But then are we penalizing these people because their habits have not been as good, right, as we want them to be, or or are we judging them for the choices they've been making in their life, right? Is it our job to do so? So that's one of the reactions that I had when I heard that.
Excellent. And so those kinds of judgments are exactly what for almost everyone in our lives have tried to convince us not to do, is don't be judgmental. We've all heard that. And yet I'm throwing you into the deep end here, forcing you to be judgmental. And so this is part of the crisis of what we're entering into, is how do we make effective judgments, or do we minimize our involvement in the judgments? Lotteries using chance minimize that judgment, that judgmentalism that is very, very much a part of our society. And yet medicine is designed to make judgments constantly. And so you have to have that trained out of you, or you have to be more than aware of what your judgments will cause you, what problems down the road any judgment will have. And so either Paul or Chris, what did you think of the chance? You obviously went a different direction. What did you think of Victoria's proposal to allow the lottery to be the best way to pick?
Well, as far as her example of the prison system, I can understand how, those people need to be vaccinated, and probably some of the first, but then there's a huge category of people that need to be vaccinated first. On the one hand, you think that the nursing home people should be vaccinated first, but they have shorter longevity in general. And so how do you make that decision, I think, is similar to what you're saying. People that have bad habits, they're less likely to succeed in a new procedure, period. And that's why people, they don't even want to do joint replacements on people that smoke or, use drugs. It's not, people can do what they want to, as long as they don't harm somebody else, as far as I'm concerned. But when it comes to a decision on if there's only a few people that can have an improvement, and you're not willing to help that be successful, then why would you pick somebody like here that is going to be less successful. If you're going to use that limited resource.
Victoria, would you adjust your recommendation for a lottery at all after listening to the arguments?
No, I would consider, like I said, the beginning, the medical, there should be some filtering first, right, before you do the lottery,
Right.
to make sure that their underlying conditions do not interfere with the success of the procedure. Then, I think, I know, I still think at the end, it's a choice that you still are gonna have to make, right? There will be more than 10 people who will qualify. I'm not sure that that there should be a very extensive list of those filters, right? That should influence who will get the chance to enter the lottery. I'm sure that medical personnel should be trusted on that for sure. But ultimately, I would go with the lottery.
Excellent. Okay, fine. Final comment, Paul or Chris?
Um, yeah, I mean, the random or lottery system that, that certainly makes it easier for the God committee to, and since it's a new way of evaluating people, or, a new treatment that's available, they maybe need more criteria. And so maybe they would go, maybe random. And I guess my only example is looking at it, blindfolded and picking people, so that there isn't some kind of outside influence. When I saw patients, I would have some staff who would come to me and say, "This is a Medicare patient," or "This is a self-pay patient." And day one, my staff knew if I was on duty, I did not want to know anything about their insurance status. I didn't want to, and they just immediately would all of a sudden label these people. It was like, well, is that going to change my treatment? Well, it obviously is. You're making a judgment. I don't want to hear anything about it. So when you talk about random, that is one thing the committee would not be biased or prejudiced as far as selecting these 10 people out of 100,000. So anyway, that's just one thought I had.
If you pull the camera now up and look at even just our conversation, this is hard stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's challenging. It's people's lives. And so here's the key points that came out of the God Committee in 1961, having nothing like this in the literature prior to 61. Here are their final choices. Could the patients live close to the hospital for regular treatment? There you go, Chris. So this was obvious. It was an obvious point. You picked on this one just to make it important for them. But the second one was intriguing. Were they residents? Because Washington State had helped with the funding to build a dialysis machine. And so the politicians were obviously somewhere on the periphery here. And they recognized that they wanted to participate in that. They then asked the question of calculation. What's the potential to serve society? Okay, what's the potential for this person to serve society? And so then you'd sort of say, well, what's the difference between if we have a doctor versus an artist? How do they serve? What do we do with a homeless person? What do we do with, you can see how they would be going through the biographies of their people, doing a calculation on how they could serve society. The next one was classic to 1961. Were they active in church work? At that point in our society, that was absolutely a crucial moral imperative that they not only attended a church, and this would typically probably be a Protestant church. I would think Catholics would have a real tough time. JFK has just gotten the presidency, but he had to do it despite being Catholic. So the whole conversation politically of the society on whether a Catholic should be a president. Well, I promise you that came up in the conversation. So while the bullet point is only church work, I pretty well guarantee it's going to be Protestant church work. And not just attending, are they active? This was a classic part of moral evaluation at that time in American society. And we call that participating in the Protestant ethic. But the last one was just so fascinating. Which wife could cope with loss better? And so that calculation was really intriguing. And of all the hundreds of things they could have thought of, there's what they ended up with as they picked their list. 10 lived and thousands died. What's your reaction to that?
Brian, I have a question. That last point, does that mean that they were going to choose only males?
I didn't see a demographic list, but my sense is that males would have a higher priority for the list. It would be intriguing to go back and do, because I'm sure demographic analysis is involved at this point. Now that we've looked at this committee over the years. So my sense is if there were 10, I almost guarantee 8 were men. If I were to put a number on what was comfortable, and if you looked at it, you might find all 10 were men. And again, why? Why would I pick possibly all 10? What's going on in 1961 that would make that the highest moral calculus from this list?
Well, you would think that they would choose more women because the males were the breadwinners for the family, and without that support, the family would have a hard time.
Exactly. So yeah, you can see it in the way which wife could cope with loss better. If a wife had only 1 or 2 children, but she was a professional like my mother, she could handle this if the husband wasn't picked and therefore died. She could handle it better than a wife with 5 kids and primary breadwinner. Do you see how they were sort of trying to work through this? And so, any other instincts as to this list?
It's just a very curious way to go about this problem, and it just highlights to me how far the society has gone from that in just 70 years, 60 years.
We are a different
right?
society, aren't we?
Different society, yeah. Interesting.
We have a lot of the same problems.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you did it today, proximity would be high on the list, residence status, easily high on the list. Definitely potential. If you didn't use a lottery, you're going to do a calculation on potential to serve society. So that still works. It's just the last 2 that sort of jar you as to a definition of society itself at that time.
Yeah, and it's also very it's such these 3 last points, I see them so broadly because you can serve society in so many different ways. Just the fact that you're raising children, you're serving the society, right? But they wouldn't look at it that way back then, probably. And you can overlook so many different valuable contributions that people make for the society, throughout their lives, and not even consider them at all. It's crazy how broad these are.
And so this begins it's really the beginning of bioethics, 1961. bioethics in America. So we put this as a marking point of what bioethics is. And I use the example because it sort of begins to define what bioethics has tried to accomplish through the years. Now that we're 60 years into the field of bioethics as a professional emphasis. But what this did is it recognized the role of committees, and physicians had, before this time, had sole responsibility on the decision-making status. All of a sudden, society began to realize that there's a value for committees in the hospitals and in the various settings that really difficult choices. And so the liability could be dispersed, the confidence in the quality of the decision could be dispersed. And so you really get a sense that the committee is valuable as a result of what happened here. And eventually that became a legal prerequisite. Hospitals now must have these kinds of committees. And so here in McCall, they will call the ethics committee in St. Luke's down in Boise when they're in trouble. I spent probably 3 or 4 years trying to build an ethics committee in our local hospital. It was an intriguing project. I eventually failed. And they deferred to ethics consults that were coming out of Boise. At that time, I was helping train the ethicists and the staff down at St. Luke's Boise, so I didn't really mind. And so it was sort of a fascinating project for me. And so the ethics committee comes out of the God committee. And so our hospitals should have an ethics committee. Much of my work has been helping hospitals build these, or if they had them, how do you advance them? Because Paul, if I were to say, how much bioethics training did you have in all of your time in the medical community? What's that look like, Paul?
Well, since I had a long nursing background versus medical school, nursing, you did deal a lot with ethical issues. And that, so, going through a master's program, a lot of the classes weren't always medical, but they were more, ethical. What does the ethical nurse do as far as, making sure that there was no bias and there was, no prejudice in, treatment. So, some, but, certainly not to the extent that we're talking about now.
Excellent. And so nursing has borne the moral conundrum of these decisions. And yet the hospital has classically been defined by the physician. And so there's often a controversy there that can develop. The nurse is the moral agent, the person often doing the hard work at the bedside. The physician is the designator delegator of the work that necessary has to be done. And so there's always been this interesting conundrum between the physician and the nurse as to how to go forward. And so often the nurse is the one that says, I think we need the ethics committee, and they'll do a consult to an ethicist or someone who is responsible for that in the hospital. And so the nurse often gets trapped in an awful lot of these difficult decisions.
Actually, the hospitals, if you work in a hospital, you get a fair amount of ethics training on a yearly basis. It gets repetitive, but especially if you do it every year, but it's necessary because you make those ethical decisions all the time. Especially, the HIPAA, you sign HIPAA forms every time you go in the hospital, and you don't really read them anymore. But if you read it the first time, it does have some ethical issues in it. And
and we're thankful for that. So welcome to this ongoing conversation of the real professionalization of ethics, which is what the field of bioethics is. It is the professionalization of a very difficult task that comes out of these kinds of committees. And so then these committees needed to have someone that was highly trained, not only in philosophy, healthcare, that would be involved, trained in religion. There was a real diverse, because what they typically did is most of these hospitals had a seminary close by. And so we began to see the seminary professors being the ones that began to serve on these early committees, because their philosophy training was the strongest. As we begin to see that, to see how this is working out, how do you make a calculus of serving society? And so the philosophers were the ones that they had confidence in, and so they were the earliest ethicists that came over to the hospital and began to help us understand the moral questions that were being asked by every one of these cases. And so there's just a short history on how bioethics has really come to be into these. And eventually the theologians began to slip away, and it just became a professionalized field where an ethicist was called on, who would come in with as much training as possible and serve as the chairs of these committees. And so that's sort of a rapid history of the field of ethics. And so welcome to Bioethics and Pandemics. And so I'd come back to you, Chris. Why is ethics crucial to healthcare?
Well, why is it crucial to anything?
Okay, so ethics
It's a
involved
philosophy for everything. So healthcare is no different than, treating your neighbor. But why is it crucial? I guess so certain people don't have an advantage over other people. So you treat the patient and not their pocket, and you treat the a person of color the same as anyone else, sexual orientation.
So a lot of, if I could synthesize what you're focusing on, there's a fairness issue. You want to be fair in healthcare. And much of what you're sensing there is you want to be able to figure out how to be fair, and to recognize your biases. You might be biased to one of those communities that causes you to just instinctively be unfair, and you may not even realize it. So fairness is a crucial part of healthcare, so that people have access to resources. And our whole theme is scarce resources. Healthcare is a scarce resource, and you want to make sure that you're fair in the distribution of those resources. Victoria, what's your instinct as to ethics and health?
In addition to what was said already, I think ethics is an important addition to a lot of healthcare considerations, because healthcare has to do with life and death decisions often, and we want to be compassionate. We want to be respectful of people who are on the receiving end of those decisions, and their families as well. And it probably is, one of them. I'm not a doctor, of course, but I can imagine only what a difficult task that is for doctors to address these life and death decisions that people have to make, and with the help of their expertise. Yeah.
It's an interesting question. How many doctors were on the God committee? Did you catch that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
exactly. Not many, right?
I'll go, I think I know the answer, but let's go back and look. How many doctors?
one.
One. Mm-hmm.
And so for some reason, this interesting committee was developed specifically with physicians as the minimal part of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
And so your point is well taken on ethics. Paul, what's your thoughts to that question?
You mentioned, limited resources. The other thing is the financial considerations, which you would think should never play a part in making a decision regarding, healthcare. Providing somebody, medicines or surgery or hospitalization. But that's been such a huge part of United States healthcare system, and that is reimbursement and insurance companies and their influence and HMOs, making these decisions, all dependent on, the almighty dollar. And, hospitals having to say, that's fine. If this is 20,000, 30,000 bucks a day for this patient, who's going to pay for it? This patient we know is going to die in, 2 weeks. So the committee comes in and says, well, we're going to eat the cost, or no, you're going to send them to a nursing home, or, that's involved with a lot of these decisions where it should just be a bioethical, decision, but it isn't sometimes. It's a financial. You saw a banker on there. You saw a labor leader. You saw who else?
There you go.
On that committee.
A lawyer.
A lawyer. Now, that's kind of interesting. Their influence on it.
Yeah, fascinating one. And so ethics is going to deal with the foundations of healthcare. And it's sort of like your own house. How many times do you go look at your foundations? Not very often. You go look at them when there's ants crawling up your foundation and you're trying to get the ants out of your house. I mean, that's about the only time I ever go look at my foundation. But healthcare has a foundation, and it's built on some crucial principles that allow healthcare. And one of them we've been talking about over and over tonight, and that's fairness, which is encompassed in the doctrine of justice. Is what we are doing just? And so there's a lot of other principles that we'll be talking about in our time together. And ethics, in a philosophical point of view, is going to be built on principles. And those principles is what we're going to evaluate. And we're going to see how those principles are functioning. And we're going to see what a pandemic does to those principles. And so that's going to be a crucial part of our conversation as well. But ethics is people. It's just people in healthcare. And if we define it that way, then we're going to have to say, and people make mistakes because people are people. And healthcare's got to figure out how to deal with the mistakes of having people in the middle of healthcare because they're going to screw up. And how do we create a system that minimizes those screw ups? Because when you screw up, you risk things, including life itself. And so ethics is crucial to healthcare because it's got people in it. And those people you have to give some credence to as to how they are functioning within the healthcare system. And so my last question before we take, there we go. What does ethics have to do with me? I think I've got a sense of that. Do you want to, I think I've got a pretty good handle on that for all of you. Any of you want to sort of take a shot at it? What does ethics have to do with me? I think I've got that. I'd like to change the question. And I may come up with later, but I sense I need it right now. How do I stay safe in this conversation? how do I stay safe in this conversation? Folks, when I began my journey as an ethicist, I defined my job as walking into a minefield, letting all the bombs go off, and walking out of it trying to see if I'd lost any limbs. That's how I define my professional responsibility. And so we're going to walk into minefields together. And we're going to feel like sometimes we lost a hand or a foot, because it's going to be really serious on what we're going to say. And you want to say safe. We've got people now that you've never met. You have no idea what they would do with the information we're going to talk about. You don't know if the ideas are safe. You don't know if they're going to run to the paper tomorrow and publish your story in the paper or throw it onto social media because it sounds fun and they want to get some more hits tonight from the story you just told. You don't know anything about us. How do you stay safe in a conversation like this?
I think in any class that in a lot of different classes that I've taken in my life, even in the teaching profession, I had a teaching degree from Oregon, from Portland State University. I feel like we constantly share information with others, that we just simply trust each other to adhere to ethics, actually, to not, and to moral standards, to not run and do what you're describing with the information that people share. And if you do not feel safe enough to share that kind of information, you just don't. And that's what happens a lot in classroom settings. You just need that atmosphere of safety, and it is sometimes deliberately created by teaching staff, and sometimes it is not addressed, but people just have to make their gut decision about that and go with that.
So what I'm hearing from you is you need a sense that there's going to be confidentiality here.
No, I need a sense that I can trust everyone.
Okay.
That is, yeah, that's all.
So whatever, so
I don't demand. I mean, I cannot ask for confidentiality from people. We're not signing any papers, contracts.
no, we're not. It will be all oral. And so trust is your key word. You want to be able to trust us to handle whatever we are going to hear from you in a fair and a safe manner, so that you aren't threatened as a result of what you've shared with us. Fair enough?
I guess so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else do we need to do to make this a safe environment? Because this is really dangerous stuff.
I guess if I, in a group, make a statement and somebody comes back, or what I appreciate would be them to listen, and if they need clarification, that they would say, is this what you really mean, or is this what you're saying? So there's that mutual respect, but also the idea that, you know, I need to respect others by listening, and then also respecting enough to kind of ask them, would you, you know, clarify that, or is this, you know, kind of what I'm understanding? And I may agree or disagree, but I do want to, you know, have that, you know, mutual understanding with conversations.
Excellent. So you're begging us to use good listening techniques, to listen well. If you have a question, ask a question for clarification and allow you to make your point as clearly as possible. So use good listening techniques. Respect is a key word you're using. and to recognize everybody in this little room of ours technologically is different, and we're going to have different points, and come to each point with a different with a sense of respect of each other and of the environment, and to respect me as a person, and to do that. Does that encapsulate it well?
Yes.
Okay. Chris, do you have a sense of what's coming to mind for you?
Well, I feel comfortable with the four of us conversing, and usually, I don't feel uncomfortable with voicing my opinion. But I also like to be stopped if because I can be misunderstood, or I like listening to other people's points. So I guess I feel comfortable being in this setting, and I don't know. Are you using this to these conversations for other people to listen to as well? You mentioned that earlier.
Yes, there will be others that can't be with us in this conversation. And that's why I want you to be comfortable that at any time, if you've said something or you've told a story and you realize, boy, this could be misinterpreted by somebody, then let's edit it out of our conversation. So that's what it's limited. It's going on my Ethics Center site, and only those that again, other students that want to participate in the content, even if they can't participate in the conversation. And so I've already had one request for that. So I'm sort of setting this up so that student can do it. And so I think we would at this point ask any student that sees this content to agree with us that this is what they will do. So they'll maintain confidentiality. Nothing goes out of this circle that we talked about. They'll maintain a sense of trust, that we have to trust them to be good students and to protect us and protect each other. They have to agree to listen and to clarify if possible. And I'd encourage anyone to send me an email so that I could bring it back into the room and ask you a question if there's anyone else. So this isn't going to be for broad-based usage, but it is, there will be others that may see it, okay? In respect of who we are, our ideas, and what we do with those ideas. Anything else you want to make sure that we voice before we finish with this part of our conversation?
I don't think so.
Okay. Anybody need a break? You okay? I would normally, I promised them that I wouldn't, go past, 8:15-ish or 8. This is a conversation that is lifetime in length. So it really strains me sometimes to shut her down. What's your timing for the course? Does 8 o'clock make the most sense? Does 8:15 make the most sense? Does 8:30 make the most sense?
Doesn't matter to us. I mean, if we get into something that we want to finish a conversation with, then
Okay.
we can go further.
Victoria, are you okay? So if I were to shoot for 8:15 and shut it down at 8:30, regardless of what's going on, are you comfortable with that, Victoria, or would you like 8 and 8:15? What's your sense?
I would go for the middle ground, like shoot for the middle.
Shoot 8:15 and try and shut her down as quickly as I can after that. And absolutely, it's done by 8:30. Okay, anybody need a break?
No.
Everybody okay? I'm okay. I can keep going. Thank you. And so who's this guy in front of you? That is so, that's so self-assured that he's take on this test. And so I I don't have much of a background here because it's crazy. But as I've talked to you about my mother and my father and a medical family that's very much in line with what you've talked about tonight. My undergraduate program was in biology. My assumption is I'd be going into medical school. And sadly, I never chose to apply to medical school. So I will never know if I would have ever gotten in. I chose to go on to graduate studies in genetics. And so I went into the field of genetics at the University of Oregon as a master's student. And I went there because I was so intrigued with this reasonably new field in 1980 that I thought would be wonderfully interesting. But what I did discover in Eugene was a wife. And I found a gal from Eugene that's a wonderful hippie from Eugene. She calls herself a bohemian sophisticate. I still call her a hippie. And I ran out of money after my first year at University of Oregon. I'm a foreign student from Canada. And so I just had to bag it. And so then I decided I'd better go find something that I could use a biology degree with. And so I returned to Vancouver, British Columbia, and sought employment with SmithKline and French Pharmaceuticals. And if you talk about ethical quandaries, Paul, you talk about walking into the minefield of all minefields, is if you become a pharmaceutical rep. And I figured, hey, but there's good money there, and I sure needed a boatload of that stuff. So off I went with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and that's SmithKline, now GlaxoSmithKline. And I launched Tagamet, and my first task was to get physicians to stop writing antacids and get them to write cimetidine. And I thought this was all sorts of fun, to try and get these physicians to stop using antacids because it wasn't doing much. But they thought it was wonderful, so I had to help them understand that it wasn't doing wonderful things. And so it was really a fun 10 years. I was promoted out of Vancouver, British Columbia, to serve as the medical school specialist at the University of Washington Medical School. And so I entered into that particular field in Seattle as a part of my development. But I had one of my wonderful gastroenterologists at Harborview Medical Center stop me and he said, "Brian, you could do more with your life. Yes, you're doing fine. You could do more." And it really caused me to really stop and realize that making money wasn't the best goal of my life. I better try and do something else. And I encountered a friend of mine that had encountered the field of bioethics. And I started realizing that field took my biology background, which was my undergraduate degree. It took my work in pharmaceuticals as I was trying to deal with the moral dilemmas of offering pens to physicians and trying to figure that out. And cupcakes. It was, I was sort of the cupcake guy at every clinic that I could find. But also in the advanced studies of therapy and delivering sophisticated medicine to the attendings at a medical school. And how do you do that well? And I realized bioethics would be intriguing. And so I decided that might be my future. And if I were to get a doctorate in bioethics, that was a worthy goal for a young man in the medical community. And so I looked around and found that the best program on the West Coast was at USC, but I wasn't ready. So I decided I would do some theological training to build my philosophy and theology background. So I went to Fuller and got my master's there, and then was invited. I received a full ride to come to USC and study bioethics with the bioethicist who was the sole bioethicist in the city of Los Angeles, and was trained by him as a bioethicist with a PhD in social ethics. And so I had a wonderful time. I really enjoyed my time there. I needed a job, so I thought that was interesting. So I went to Warner Pacific University and served as associate professor of religion and ethics and healthcare, having built the healthcare administration program, Paul, for Warner Pacific as my final project, as I realized I was done and needed to do something else. I knew that Boise had no bioethics program at all that I could discern, and thought that when a position opened up in McCall that I could grab, I decided to take that position here in McCall. So as soon as I arrived in McCall, I began commuting down to Boise to try and do training with the Boise staff. Became involved with all the bioethics folks. Couldn't find anybody else in the state that had a PhD with an emphasis in bioethics. And so I felt really determined to try and build the bioethics community in Boise. Eventually, I was offered a professorship from Idaho State University to build it in Meridian. But the constraints they put on me is I had to do it by X amount of time. And in that moment, my son went into medical crisis, had a mental health collapse, and I couldn't do it in time to fulfill the conditions that they had offered me. And so it slipped away. And so I'm not in Meridian teaching at ISU right now. I'm here, my family's here. My granddaughter is 3 months old here in McCall. My grandson is 4, and I'm sort of here. So I'm just enjoying what I do, and this is what I do. And I'm thrilled you guys are a part of that. And I'm pleased with that. And so for me, I wanted to be involved in the hospital setting. And an ethicist was the way that I could do that effectively. And for me to begin that, I had to build a college, and I needed an academic platform to launch whatever I was doing, and that's McCall College. And so when I first arrived, I found a bunch of folks that would help me, and we built McCall College, and we've been doing it for 10 years. And it's as hard as nails because you for all sorts of reasons, it's a challenge. But where we've succeeded is in GED education and testing, and in professional education. So those are the areas we've been doing. And I've enjoyed working with arts and humanities. And so once a year, I always throw a course out there. Sometimes it's in religion, sometimes it's in ethics, sometimes it's in bioethics. You never know where I might go. And this year I decided in the middle of pandemic, we needed to talk about bioethics. And so I'm pleased to be here tonight. I've always enjoyed scholarship. I have published many books, articles, all sorts of stuff in my career. And my most recent was my little 30-page scholarship that I do for nurses. And I call it a complementary bioethic. And it's something I'll be asking you to read. So I enjoy the scholarship, though it's the toughest thing I do. But I enjoy doing that. So there's my very long elevator speech of who Brian Williams is. So questions that you have of who I am?
It's good to get to know you better.
Thank you.
We attend the Great Decisions, which you always participated in and been a big part of. But we always enjoy sitting there listening to you.
Yeah. You'd be a better facilitator than we are, than the group, but anyway.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I long for people that can think well. And even if it's only for 10 seconds, and you all know where else I inhabit to try and get healthcare. In the evenings, I have to trade TV time for healthcare. And so that puts me in the position of asking you whether you'd like paper or plastic, but we don't have paper, so you're getting plastic. And so it's this wonderful, what do you do in McCall to get healthcare? And for me, it's go find the biggest corporation, like I did when in the pharmaceutical area, find the biggest corporation you can go to, because things are easier when you've got a great corporation to work with. And Albertsons became that here. So, and I like their healthcare. It's a whole lot better than St. Luke's, or I would bet it's probably better than ISU's healthcare. So I'm pleased to be here and serve the community in any way I can. I call my job the concierge of McCall, because I talk to everybody. I only get about 10, 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And if they have a big order, maybe a couple minutes. But I always try and accomplish something in the time I have. And people are always sort of amazed that I'm standing there. But that's okay. I accomplished something in that area too.
Have you asked a shopper to put on their mask?
Oh, I do it every night. We had mask wars last night. The cops were called because mask wars were going on at Albertsons last night. So yes, I'm deeply involved in that problem. I am the most, in my judgment, the most vulnerable in the store. I am of the age group. I'm of the, for so many levels. And I'm closest. I'm 2 feet away from all of my customers, and I deal with 200 in a shift. So when you've got 200, you really worry about it. And so last night it broke out into mask wars as people were trying to force others to put masks on, because they realized that Albertsons wasn't very strong at imposing the demands of our county on our customers. And that's a challenge for a business that I watch them trying to negotiate. And I have lots of critiques of Albertsons as a result of that. But I feel I can keep myself safe, therefore I go. I wouldn't be there if I didn't feel I could be safe. And I think I can keep safe. And I prove it.
But I think that has an ethical issue there, and kind of a bioethical.
Very much.
Whether you are, if you own the business, whether you can say that a customer has to leave forcefully, if not, using gentler techniques. But if you own the business, do you have the right to force a customer out?
Yes,
or
we do.
shut down the store?
Yeah, Albertsons, not often, but Albertsons bans people from the store. And a couple of them have been for mask abuse. But there's thousands of people in there. It's very rare. And so, but yes, they will do it. They have done it. But for me, I'm alone. So I'm responsible for myself. And I don't lean on Albertsons too much. I just have to accomplish a difficult task every night. So that's my craziness. Okay, how are we doing? I got 20 minutes. Let's launch into this and go as far as life will allow us. And so welcome to the field of study that we're launching into. What I'd like for you to achieve in the next 4 weeks is I'd like to give you an introduction and to begin using bioethics classic principles and vocabulary. I think you can already sense one of them that we've talked about all night so far. Justice, classic principle of bioethics. And you always fall back to the philosophers, because the philosophers have been talking about justice from the time of really humanity, but the one that gets the most airtime for it is Plato. 500 BC, Plato, his primary book called The Republic is to help us understand justice. And he continues to be the #1 voice in our society for what justice means. And so we'll talk about these classic principles of beneficence, being good to other people, non-maleficence, don't do harm to other people, autonomy, recognize the value of the individual. And so these classic principles and vocabulary we'll just begin using, and I hope they become second nature to you. We'll have to understand how the vocabulary and our understanding shifts in pandemics, because this is huge on what's just happened in our hospitals. They have been forced to change, and no major organization changes quickly, and a pandemic forces them to change quickly. And so there's just tremendous upheavals going on in the moral foundation of hospitals right now. And so we're seeing that in lots of ways as how our society is structured and how pandemics are forcing us to change and that's creating some of the problems you're seeing. I'll be introducing you to how bioethicists analyze situations, and I have my own types of analysis that helps me. I'll do brief introductions, and also if there is anyone that's on an ethics committee, and of which there's not tonight, then we would also introduce them to the ethics committee practices and awareness. And so that's sort of what I'm doing. What else? Anything else you'd like for me to accomplish in this? What do you want to accomplish?
This is new for me, so I'm just along on this ride with you, and you lead. That's good.
Victoria is just a great student. She is so much fun to study with. I'm so glad she's here. And I have the privilege of hundreds, thousands of students. And it's a joy to have Victoria among that. And I welcome Paul and Chris into that field. I can already sense you guys, with all your education, you've had to be good students. So I just assume you're great students. So welcome. It's a joy to work with you. Any other issues that you want to make sure is on the table on what we're going to accomplish here?
At some point, can you tell us maybe what this, I think it's the Idaho COVID Vaccine Advisory Committee, who's making these decisions regarding who's getting the vaccine? If you were a fly on the wall, what some of their discussion is at some point, and maybe a lot of that's going to be
excellent. You'll start seeing it in a minute, but not specifically Idaho. That's going to be one of your responsibilities, is also to help me. I'm gonna present you with Idaho. I'd like for you also to pick a state and find out how another state of interest to you. So Victoria, I bet you'd do Alaska, because you have such a great background out of Alaska. You could even pick Russia as to how Russia is setting up their vaccine distribution. So I'm going to try and do that as a bit of homework, and you can start any time as to how a place of interest to you, and you could do Idaho. That's fine. You're here. Jump into Idaho, but I'm going to be trying to do that one. And if you had another state that you like, I think you've all come from a little different backgrounds. Pick something and jump into the either the crisis management that's going to be happening in hospitals, or you can pick the recommendation. And I think let's just stay with the recommendations for vaccine, and how are they doing that? And what you're really looking for are what are the moral principles that they're going to use to define how they're going to triage the vaccine into the community, and what's happening there. And so I'd love it out of this class. I could have 3 different states or countries on how they're thinking. And Victoria, you can even translate it for us, so we would know we're getting good translation. And so thank you. So thank you, Paul. Yes, I want to do that as far as our time together. Anything else you want us to accomplish?
Well, there's a COVID advisory committee in McCall, and supposedly they have a crisis management plan. I would we could, if we got a copy of that, and I don't know if we have it, if this is too disruptive to what your planned coverage is, but we could discuss what their plan is.
Excellent. So
how ethical that is.
If you would like to take that as a personal task this week, I think that would be fascinating. We've only got 4 weeks. This is normally a 15-week course, so the compression is going to be really painful. And what I need for you to do is take us to where you want us to go, if at all possible. So that sounds, so I'd like to do Idaho as far as their vaccine management plan. I'd like to do Valley County. So Paul, would you pick that up? Would you seem to have an instinct for the Idaho plan. Do you want to pull that and look at it this week and send it out to all of us?
Sure. Yes, I'll do that.
You have Victoria's, and Victoria has yours just from my email. You've already got the email of each other. So just use that. And Chris, if you'd like to do the county plan, I'd love to see it. I haven't dropped into it myself. I'd love to see it. So do you want to take that as a task?
Sure.
Sure. Victoria, what's your instinct as to who you'd like to study outside of Idaho and Valley County?
Well, like you said, it would be easiest for me to dive into Alaska. Actually, I did some translations for the state of Alaska on COVID vaccine distribution.
Wow, perfect. Okay.
And so that would be easiest for me, but I can also touch on Russia and see how they're doing it. I think in Russia probably be very centralized and directed out of Moscow, basically for the whole country. So one plan, distribution plan for the country. I doubt they would leave that to regional decision makers. Yeah, so I'm curious about how that is done over there right now, and I don't know much about that, so I could.
Okay, so there's a personal project just to sort of launch into, and we'll be teasing out the moral issues as opposed to the technical issues. Okay, so what I want you to watch for are what are the philosophy or moral issues that these documents, you'll usually find it in the first paragraph. They'll usually lay out what their assumptions are that launches what they're going to do. So try and maintain the moral side of the argument as opposed to the technical side of the argument. Okay, and so we'll help you next week. So let's just do that as we'll start there and see what your research has done, and then we'll bounce off of that and try and make sure we're understanding what's going on in the assumptions that they're using. I'm probably going to also need to do it at the federal level. So because the federal documents are really defining the state documents, and we need to make sure we have those on deck. So I think I'm going to try and pull that one now, hearing what your assignments are. I may look at the federal documents, okay? Just to see how they're defining what we're looking at. Okay, good. Sorry, this is how homework happens. In courses like this, it's, hey, what do you want to do? Oh, we've already done that. Well, when we want to look at bioethics, we have to go back to the father of medicine and the father of healthcare, and that's Hippocrates. Oh, nuts, I forgot to bring it in. I have all of the writings of Hippocrates in my library. It's probably my most valuable book. It literally has pages that have never even been cut and opened. It's this amazing book, probably from the 20s, of Hippocrates. I'm pretty sure it doesn't have a date in it. It's one of those ancient texts that are just back from. It's my most favorite text. Sorry, I didn't bring it. But let me read the Hippocratic Oath. And again, you're going to hear some things that might surprise you. I swear by Apollo the physician, and you can see on the. I've done some. I've broken the ideas into concepts, and so you can sort of read that as I'm reading the actual oath. But also, if you hear something that's surprising, make a note of it so we can sort of catch what's happening in his cultural context. I swear by Apollo the physician, and Asclepius and health, and all heal, and all the gods and goddesses, that, according to my ability and judgment, I will keep this oath and this stipulation, to reckon him who taught me this art equally dear to me as my parents, to share my substance with him, and to relieve his necessities if required, to look upon his offspring in the same footing as my own brothers, and to teach them this art, if they shall wish to learn it, without fee or stipulation, and that by precept, lecture, and any other mode of instruction, I will impart a knowledge of the art to my own sons, and to those of my teachers, and to disciples bound by a stipulation and oath, according to the law of medicine, but to none others. I will follow that system of regimen which, according to my ability and judgment, I consider for the benefit of my patients, and abstain from whatever is deleterious and mischievous. I will give no deadly medicine to anyone if asked, nor suggest any such counsel. And in like manner, I will not give to a woman a pessary to produce abortion. With purity and with holiness, I will pass my life and practice my art. I will not cut persons laboring under the stone, but will leave this to be done by men who are practitioners of this work. Into whatever houses I entered, I will go into them for the benefit of the sick, and will abstain from every voluntary act of mischief and corruption, and further from the seduction of females or males, of free men or slaves, whatever in connection with my personal practice or not, in connection with it, I see or hear in the life of men, which ought not to be spoken of abroad, I will not indulge or reckon as such should be kept secret. While I continue to keep this oath unviolated, may it be granted to me to enjoy life and the practice of the art, respected by all men in all times. But should I trespass or violate this oath, may the reverse be my lot. How long do you think any medical student actually did the entire oath of Hippocrates? A long time. Paul, did you have to do an oath when you finished your PA study or your nurse practitioner studies?
No oath.
There was no oath. So same question. Did you encounter one at all, Chris?
I kind of remember something about that, but I mean it's been so long ago that I don't remember, to tell you the truth.
Did either of you have a pinning ceremony?
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, for your nursing training. Often the nurses will have a cap.
Did you have a cap, Paul?
I think Paul may have skipped that step. There are traditions.
PAs actually are trained under the medical model, like physicians, and nurse practitioners are trained in the nursing, more of a nursing format.
So the oath.
There's a difference.
The oath. What else did you hear in that oath that sort of got your attention? Victoria, what did you hear?
Yeah, there were some interesting points. It's kind of fun to hear it for the first time. Yeah, it was interesting to me. Closer to the beginning, there was a mention of treating everybody with equality, basically, and no fee. That was new to me. I wouldn't really expect that. Yeah, and some.
Did you catch who he wasn't going to charge? There was one category of student that he wasn't going to charge. I'm assuming that everyone else is going to get charged, but
That's one thing. But it was just a limited, to someone who is,
his teacher's kids. Did you catch that? It's his teacher's kids that he would train with no fee. Which is the start. Again, my sons went to college with tuition free because I was a professor, and so the college that they attended both honored my professorship and gave my kids tuition. It's in the same principle of ancient Hippocrates that the teacher get a free ride. I love that idea. That's why I went into professorship, by the way. So my anything else you heard that was intriguing?
Well, there was both the refusal to do birth control and then also the HIPAA, the old HIPAA rules.
It's right there, isn't it? HIPAA's right there. Yeah, yeah. It's an important point. I will keep secrets.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would.
And also leave the procedures that you're basically not specialized to do to those practitioners who do them professionally.
Yeah, the surgeons are different than the physicians.
Mhm.
And he wasn't going to do any surgery.
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent. Anything else? What concepts are missing? What do you wish he'd have thought about?
Hmm.
Well, one of the things that I'm always fascinated with, and we're going to start next week, is the conversation on autonomy, the autonomy of the patient, the individual in an American sense. And that's an intriguing concept. You don't get a sense of autonomy in the Hippocratic Oath. It's sort of one thing that I've always been fascinated with. It is not there. Anything else you see that's missing? I'm always fascinated with the conversation on purity and holiness. I find that a wonderful conversation and you see it all through the ancient literature on purity and holiness. It's one of those things that every medical school has rewritten the Hippocratic Oath for their own students. I'm pretty sure it's not in any medical school, Hippocratic Oath. It's just a fascinating way that they talked. Plus the recognition of religion, the gods, the goddesses. Always loved that part on honoring teachers. I think that's him. For some reason, I've always liked that part. Any final comments on the Hippocratic Oath? Do you see how this is bioethics?
Mhm.
And the Hippocratic Oath is asking them, it's giving them principles and saying, live it. And if you don't live it, may your life be trashed.
Mhm.
And so those principles you're seeing in the Hippocratic Oath are exactly what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the benefit of patience. We call it beneficence. We're going to talk about the not harming patients. It's called non-maleficence. We're going to talk about justice. We're going to talk about autonomy. And so all of those are our first concepts next week. And so we're going to dive into them really quickly. Victoria, are we trying to say something?
Yeah, but also it's the concept itself that such an oath was written. It also tells in general that that physician is a profession is set apart from all other professions, right? And you are sort of a very special person, and you recognize yourself as that agent who comes to people's homes, who has access to secrets, who has all these different who should act differently because they are so set apart from other professions. And yeah, that's interesting. The ending is also interesting in terms of
I want you to also
hoping for respect for
when you
yourself.
look at a list like this, that they use ideals. And we attribute the idealism of the ancients again to Plato. Plato loved ideals, and you'll see that in elementary school. Be respectful, listen carefully, do your work, be good to others. These are all ideals. And so as we enter into modern healthcare, one of the books that's optional that you may want to put it in your library is the moral foundation of modern medicine, which is defined by Tom Beecham and James Childress. Sorry, you might think you might want to say that name of Tom's differently, but it's Beecham. And there's the four principles that we're going to be talking about. Autonomy. That's really the patient-centered care that informs modern healthcare. We want to talk about doing no harm, non-maleficence, We want to talk about doing good, beneficence. And we've been talking justice all night. It's very important to our community tonight. And we're going to see why it's so important. And we're going to see that Beecham and Childress built a way of understanding modern American healthcare that uses the terminology, we want patient-centered care. We want to focus on the patient. We want to do the best we can for the patient. As Paul was talking about, we want to make sure the economy is right for the patient. We want to make sure we're unbiased for the patient, so we don't even learn what the economic status of that is. We're very centered on the patient. That's the care of modern medicine since 1961. We've been doing that as a driving force in healthcare. And so Beecham and Childress have been the moral foundation of that. Medical students will talk about how the mantra is they had to learn these four principles, and it's part of their ethics course. While I was at the University of Washington thinking about going into ethics, I would be asking questions to med students. And one of the questions I remember asking a group of them in the elevator, and I said, well, what do you guys remember of your bioethics training? And they said, well, it's always at 2:30 and we sleep through it. And so they might have memorized the four principles, but they might have missed a few things as well. This was this early conversation with the med students at University of Washington Med School. So this is what we're going to focus on next week. But the problem, let's just launch the problem. A pandemic is not patient-centered, folks. We need to shift to community-centered care from our patient-centered care to handle a pandemic. And we've got to do that. And so when you're thinking about what's community-centered care, then you're going to be looking at different things. You're going to want to know what's the calculus. And what we talk about in philosophy that's the calculus is utility. Utility is the calculus that every business, every ER, everyone does a pro-con list and figures out how to stay on the pro side and to minimize the cons. And so that's utility. You want to derive maximum benefit. So one of the ways we get to population-centered care or community-centered care is you use utility and you use proportionality. You try and figure out what's the fair number of harm. You look at fairness, and we're going to look at that next week, is how do I make sure I'm fair? And your triage will have multiple levels of it. And I'm giving you here one, I think this is the Canadian one that I was looking at, is to what their language was for triage. And so that this was just a triage leveling of how they're going to treat those that have a risk of dying. So I was just, that's population-centered care, folks. Well, we have to take our patient-centered care and we have to make it population-centered. And that's a hard task for all of our institutions that have been so important. And so what my rating has been over the last few months is my little booklet that I use called a complementary bioethic. I'd like for you to get that and have it read by the 4th week. And so please get that. It's right now on Kindle at Amazon. Hopefully if you click the link that I sent out to you in the syllabus, it might, no, maybe I didn't activate the syllabus. Anyway, I gave you the Amazon specialty number. If you put the specialty number in, you should get it. If you put the title in, you should get it. I got it by typing in a complementary bio space ethic. I got it today when I was checking. So it should be fairly easy to get. That's the Kindle edition. If you want a paper edition, maybe that's the better question. How many want a paper edition instead of a Kindle edition?
Paper.
Paper, okay. Paper, Victoria, Kindle or paper?
And it's all about if I have it, if there is an option, yes.
Well, can you pick for me right now, Kindle or paper?
Paper would be great if there is such an option that's
Okay.
easily available. Mhm.
Okay, so paper will be coming out. I need mailing addresses. This is McCall. Nothing gets mailed to the right place. Would you please send me a mailing address immediately? Or you can pick them up at Albertsons or whatever we can figure out. But let's make some arrangements as quickly as you think about it, so I know how to get you a paper edition, and that would be appreciated. So that's that piece of paper I'd like to get in your hands. So if you,
Brian,
Yep.
Brian, would it be printed in your son's shop or not? If yes, we could just stop by and get it there.
right now, when I knew we'd have low numbers, so I just printed them myself.
When do you work, Brian?
Pardon?
When do you work?
Oh, at night, all the time. I work Sunday through Wednesdays and on Friday nights. So how about if I leave a couple in Albertsons and you can pick them up there? I know you all go through Albertsons, right?
Yeah.
At customer service or?
I'll leave them at customer service. Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do an envelope and hope they won't be irritated at me.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to put them right in front of just say they're over behind the gloves and the masks. And so that's where they're going to be put. I'll put them right behind that and tell everybody what's going on. Okay, so that's what we'll do. Okay, here's the homework for this week. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. Okay, I'd like for you to select one healthcare moral problem you encounter this week. We've talked about vaccines, that's coming easiest. I'd like for you to pick any moral problem that you encounter. I'd like for you to write out the moral arguments on both sides, pro con. And particularly, let's just leave it at pro con. What's positive, what's negative on the moral arguments. I'd like for you to tell me what side you're on and why. Okay, this lecture will be available at the Ethics Center, and I will accept students up till the start of next week. Okay, I want to be able to email to them. I would prefer not to accept any on Thursday of next week. So I'd love it if it was up till next Wednesday, so that at least they could do some reading and listen to the lecture and have time to do it. But I will accept anybody up to next Thursday night. So, and thank you, Chris. You your wonderful question, why aren't all these people in this course that are doing all these moral decisions constantly? And that's a lovely question. So if you have anyone else you'd like to study with, invite them. We have some openings, obviously. Okay.
Thank you.
But this is the McCall problem I face at every course I go into. It's really hard to put enough people at the same time on the same topic in a room. And so it's just a challenge for McCall. So I welcome more students, but they do need to look at the lecture prior to next Thursday. Okay, otherwise they'll be lost.
Brian,
Yes.
have you thought about, sending your lecture to ISU? Because I know the PA program, we had ethics classes, and you could be a special speaker to both the PA and MP programs, and now they have medical students. So
Yeah, I've been trying to send my paper. They changed the chair of the program at in Meridian, and the old chair, as a result of the expectation of our governor that they hire me, literally, tried to. My issues happened. The chair changed. I've got a new chair down there, and so I need to talk to her this week. So what I'm hearing from you is I'm going to talk to her this week and reintroduce myself and make sure she's aware of who I am and what I'm doing. I'm going to send her my book, and that's usually the start to serving as special speaker, is they know what your scholarship is. So let me begin that journey on your advice. I'd be pleased to. Anything else tonight, folks? Okay, so there are a couple things. Get the booklet. begin some research in a field of interest, and try and work out one moral argument with a pro-con list. Okay, so I think we've settled into three things. Get your booklet, get some research done on the vaccine distribution that is an area of interest to you, and my brain's gone. And the pro-con list of one moral argument that you find fascinating that relates to this course and is healthcare related, and you're involved with in some way, shape, or form, or highly interested in. Okay, so let's see where that takes you by next week. Final questions for everybody.
Good.
I knew it'd be 8:30. Just this is so tough. Okay, all. It's a joy to study with you. Feel free.
Thanks, Brian.
Send me an email if you need clarity. I'm happy to sort of tease this out. I think I'll probably send out an email of these 3 items just so that you have a checklist because it's not in the syllabus yet. And again, that syllabus was just on the fly. Please don't look at the syllabus too much. It's an on the fly syllabus. Anyway, that's it. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye-bye.